The EFF is astounded that those opposition parties who once called for the incarceration of thieves are now mum on these issues, as they rather prefer to enjoy blue lights, bodyguards, and the benefits of serving in the so-called government of national unity.
But our model is most effectively described as being free market. This will drive some of the members of this House half crazy with ideological fury. But here's the thing.
You will find them particularly in the DA benches. They don't talk against corruption. They say nothing against a maladministration. In fact, they stand up to glorify the ANC in this House, the DA.
Since 2008, and just to remind our members in green, that's when Zuma came in, struggling SOEs have received 520 million in bailouts. And to Honorable Kwena, under Zuma, almost 60% went to SOEs.
Your time is nigh. Even those of you that benefited from Steinhoff, and you will find them in the DA.
Since 1994, state-owned enterprises have been seen as vehicles for the political elite to build empires, create sheltered employment for friends and political comrades, and to strip and pillage state resources at a seemingly increasing tempo. It took a very short space of time for very few people and one morally corrupt ruling political party to turn the entity into a basket case, unable to meet its mandate, unable to pay its creditors. The majority of these bailouts were necessitated by the disastrous leadership of one Jacob Zuma, who used the state-owned enterprises as a piggy bank for himself, his close allies, and through his...
Without further scrutiny, let's move on to the Honourable Skierkogel, who will take us through his arguments in this debate. Honourable Skierkogel.
Yes, it will be mentioned here. Chairperson, honourable members, fellow South Africans. Section 41(1)(h) of the South African Constitution emphasizes that all spheres of government and their organs must cooperate in mutual trust and good faith. Unfortunately, state-owned enterprises have violated this principle by misusing public funds, undermining basic service delivery that directly impact the lives of ordinary South Africans. The endless cycle of bailouts for failing SOEs has drained vital resources, leaving local government in crisis. Central to the Democratic Alliance policy is that public funds must be spent transparently, responsibly, and effectively to benefit you, South Africans. Deserves safe streets, clean water, reliable energy, and resilient public infrastructure. These are basic rights, not privileges. Yes, yet the misallocation and misuse of public funds to SOEs has consistently undermined the government's ability to deliver on these responsibilities. Since 2008, and just to remind our members in green, that's when Zuma came in, struggling SOEs have received 520 million in bailouts. And to Honourable Kwena, under Zuma, almost 60% went to SOEs. But their performances have not improved. Eskom, for example, has received the largest share of these funds, and yet they want to increase electricity tariffs by 36.15%, which in plain words will mean that in 2025, you will pay 2,960 more on electricity monthly. And just this week, we discovered that Eskom wasted a staggering 840 million on an abandoned Wilge project in Mpumalanga. Homes, schools, Hospitals and business are suffering, and communities lost out on opportunities for growth due to load shedding. Small businesses closed, jobs were lost, and young people's futures are dimmed, all while local governments, which are directly responsible for delivering essential services, receive minimal funding to address their growing needs. The DA proposes a shift in priorities. Instead of continuing to prop up failing enterprises, we must focus on investing in municipalities and local governments that serve the immediate needs of communities. Public funds, your taxes, should go towards services directly improving your quality of life, such as infrastructure, waste management, water and electricity. Every bailout is a direct trade-off, taking money away from these critical services in exchange of bailing out SOEs that are not delivering their mandate. Take EXCOM as culprit number one as an example. The funds is received for bailouts could have been better spent on improving local infrastructure, repairing potholes, maintaining parks, or ensuring consistent waste collection. Municipalities are left with little to no resources to explore sustainable energy solutions or manage local water supplies. As a result, communities face daily power outages due to crumbling infrastructure and water shedding. An entire municipality unable to access clean water or dealing with sewage flowing in their homes. These failures jeopardize health, safety, and environmental stability. The situation is also dire to our local municipalities' infrastructure. Many municipalities can't maintain roads, public buildings, or recreational facilities because they stretch thin to funding SOEs. Poor road conditions lead to increased accidents, difficulty accessing work or healthcare, and further strain on community. Waste piles up in our streets, creating health hazards and undermining the quality life for South Africans. The most vulnerable of our communities, those who are unemployed, elderly, ill, suffer the most of this imbalance. These local governments are underfunded. It's these citizens who bear the brunt of these failures. They cannot afford to seek private services, and they rely on the government to provide these basics. It's time for change. We must stop the endless cycle of SOE bailouts and start investing in our people. The DA calls for policy shift and prioritizing communities and ensures accountability, demand effective management of resources. We believe that the funding should be directed to the sectors that impact every South African: schools, hospitals, local infrastructure, and sustainable energy solutions. This will help rebuild trust and create resilient communities. As I conclude, we want to build a South Africa that works for everyone, not just a few. We want to ensure that our government works for its people. It's time to stop funding failing institutions and investing in our communities to make our country strong. I thank you.
Thank you very much.
Move on to the next speaker, that is Honorable Gericka, the Economic Freedom Fighters. You have 15 minutes.
I don't know if we must say today, kiss the boer, kiss the farmer. Deputy Chairperson, state-owned enterprises are an important feature of the political economy of South Africa, as they stand as vehicles of national development strategies. As commercially run companies under government ownership, SOEs are by design established for economic development, where the state assumes a prominent role in the development of infrastructure. They are inherently part of and responsible to foster development and optimize integration of infrastructure development in order to uplift, empower, and strengthen the economy and create opportunities for those who were grossly disadvantaged by the crooked system of apartheid and colonialism. The role of SOEs also includes to serve as a vehicle to facilitate improved economic growth and poverty reduction. They also play a key role in promoting socio-economic development by providing a wide range of products and services to the nation. They play an important role first in terms of the direct services which they provide, such as access to water, electricity, sanitation, and transportation. And in this country, people's access to water, electricity, sanitation, and transportation is almost entirely dependent on the state. And they are engines of economic survival. However, in South Africa, under the leadership of the ruling party, we have witnessed how many of these entities are run by politicians and officials as if it is their own personal property or business, with little regard given to the relevant pieces of legislation governing state-owned enterprises. State-owned enterprises experience a number of challenges which have brought these entities to their knees. They have suffered immense financial losses at the hands of corrupt and incompetent politicians and officials who were actually supposed to give effect to constitutional imperatives such as Section 27 of the Constitution of South Africa that seeks to protect the social rights of all South Africans. South African state-owned enterprises are inefficient, they operate at a loss, and fail to provide critical public goods and services due to various mismanagement and corruption. The EFF is aggrieved by the fact that hundreds of billions of rands are poured into almost all these entities, supporting corruption, maladministration, cronyism, and nepotism. This has come at the inconvenience of millions of South Africans who cannot afford a decent basket of food, lack proper health care, and no access to land and human settlement, and this is true particularly in the Western Cape as well. With unemployment standing as one of the primary negative consequences of the decline of state enterprises, as state enterprises are major employers, providing jobs to a significant portion of the workforce. Chairperson, most of the challenges faced by the state-owned enterprises are as a result of leadership failures encountered in this country as huge amounts of monies are poured into South African Airways, Eskom, Transnet, only for them to be looted and ransacked by corrupt people. And it is regrettable that the squandering and looting of state money is continuing at the cost of millions of poor and vulnerable South Africans. State-owned enterprises, financial and management crisis has but deepened throughout the years without a practical and implementable plan to rescue them. The decline of state enterprises in South Africa carries significant social implications that extend well beyond economic considerations. Equally, service delivery to normal, ordinary South Africans is negatively impacted due to the underperformance, maladministration, and corruption that continue to sow havoc in our country. In a recent investigation by a research company, it has been established that South Africa is heading to a nationwide uprising and protest because of a lack of water sources to poor communities. Water shedding is awaiting us due to poor performance and financial mismanagement. The research shows that only the affluent, wealthy will be able to afford and have access to water. This inequality and discrimination against the poor has all been done under ANC rule. For 30 years, comrades, for 30 years, thieves and unscrupulous individuals got away with a culture of looting the very important SOEs that were supposed to uplift, create the quality of life of the poor and vulnerable sections of our communities. Those who are primarily responsible to collect these entities are now rewarded with top positions even in Parliament. Transnet has collapsed under ANC rule. Poor communities throughout the country are struggling to have access to more affordable train services due to the looting. The EFF expressed gross concern that those monies that were stolen and robbed by those who were in charge of SOEs, even ruthlessly stood unconcerning against the upliftment of our educational and healthcare systems, as well as our people's social security network. The poor are still sitting in dilapidated schools, and in some instances, healthcare has collapsed. The poor and needy are totally forgotten, and unashamedly, thieves have been allowed to enrich themselves at the cost of the poor. The EFF further calls on the police and National Prosecuting Authority to expedite all outstanding investigations against those who were responsible for these dishonest acts, and throw them in jail with immediate effect. This is where they belong. They have stolen from the poor and the needy, and they must even be taken, apprehended from the seats of parliament and thrown into jail. Chairperson, the fixing and rebuilding of state-owned enterprises is therefore necessary so as to instill confidence and restore trust in these institutions. What is required is strengthening of SOE legal and regulatory frameworks and practices so as to prevent corruption, to introduce transparency and accountability at all levels, and put ethics at the center of business decision making. And therefore we say that competent officials must be appointed in every position on every level of this country. Ons moet wegdoen om vriende en families aan te stel. Ons moet wegdoen om ons eie kinders aan te stel. En ons moet mense in posisies plaas wat inderdaad gekwalifiseerd is, wat verstaan hoe om ons ekonomie reg te maak, reg te ruk en ons land vorentoe te neem. The EFF will continue to call for the appointment of competent politicians and officials to revamp the entire governing system. The EFF is astounded that those opposition parties, and I want you to take seriously note of this, colleagues, is astounded that those opposition parties who once called for the incarceration of thieves are now mum on these issues, as they rather prefer to enjoy blue lights, bodyguards, and the benefits of serving in the so-called government of national unity. You will find them particularly in the DA benches. They don't talk against corruption. They say nothing against a maladministration. In fact, they stand up to glorify the ANC in this house, the DA. That is the utter form of hypocrisy and doublespeak. Therefore, none of them can be trusted to oversee state funds and projects. Ons kan julle nie eers vertrou in die komitees waar julle aangestel is nie. Ons sien hoe pronk julle daarso met suits aan, met blou ligte, want julle dien in daai komitees. Jy verdien ekstra geld, die DA is choopstil oor alles hierdie geld wat gesteel is. Dis 'n skreiende skande wat julle doen. The time for change has come, Chairperson. Die regering van nasionale eenheid is 'n skyn, is 'n shine. Die regering van nasionale eenheid, die government of national unity, gaan nie hou nie. Omdat dit 'n mensgemaakte system is, wat nie ingestem is deur die publiek van Suid-Afrika nie. Dit is wat julle geknoei het agterlangs om posisies te bekom en om julle self te verryk. Die DA is die grootste culprits as dit kom by skynheiligheid, gevolg deur die ANC. The EFF is the only party with a credible and clean record that can lead South Africa to economic freedom, employment opportunities, and state-of-the-art infrastructure development.
Colleagues, don't run out the speaker.
Die EFF neem standpunt in. Ons praat nie vandag so en môre so nie. Ons leiers het integriteit, hulle het waardes en hulle enigste doel is om ons land vorentoe te neem. En daarom sê ons viva EFF, viva! Pansi ANC, pansi! Pansi DA, pansi! ACG! Telling you. So we call on the general public to trust the EFF with their votes. We stand for clean governance. We are against maladministration. We will throw every corrupt politician and individual in the jail. And today we warn you, your time is nigh. Your time is nigh. Even those of you that benefited from Steinhoff, and you will find them in the DA. Ons gaan julle vang. Ons gaan julle die boeie aansit. En ons gaan julle borg teenstaan. Because you have stolen from the public and from people that suffer, that are disadvantaged, that are sidelined. Instead, you were supposed to build those people. Chairperson, ek word gedra nie so asseblief tog. I'm round.
You are protected, honorable member. Continue.
Yes. So, we rejoice in the fact, the EFF rejoice in the fact that you have ignored the plight of the poor. Therefore, in the next election in 2026, there will be no vote for the ANC. There will be no single vote for MK. There will be no single vote for the DA. You will all be voted out because you do not understand the principle of the
Honourable
programs of
colleagues.
clean government. Thank you very much indeed, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Gericke. Honorable colleagues, let us move on to the next honorable member, and that is the Honorable Badenhorst from the Democratic Alliance. Honorable Badenhorst, you have 10 minutes.
Honourable House Chair, honourable members, fellow South Africans, honourable Minister in the Presidency. Oh no, she's not here. I wonder why. She was on the speakers list earlier. Let's explore the reasons why she's not here. South Africa operates a free market economy. Yes, there are some constraints as government tries to ensure fairness and access, but our model is most effectively described as being free market. This will drive some of the members of this House half crazy with ideological fury. But here's the thing. In a functioning free market economy, the role of the state is to ensure that all citizens receive the basic requirements for a dignified life at an acceptable level. It is therefore necessary for the state to run certain entities that provide services to the country that are either strategic, morally imperative without reward, unpleasant, unpopular, or unprofitable. These are what we call state-owned enterprises. The need for sustainable potable water supply at pretty much cost price is what has driven the establishment of water boards. Similarly, the need for large-scale public transport without being driven by profit motive is, in part, what gave birth to Transnet, and certainly to some of its entities. These entities should operate efficiently and be largely self-funding, without generating massive profits at the expense of consumers and end users. That, at least, friends, is the theory. However, in practice, since 1994, state-owned enterprises have been seen as vehicles for the political elite to build empires, create sheltered employment for friends and political comrades, and to strip and pillage state resources at a seemingly increasing tempo. The need to create jobs saw the productivity at Eskom remain stagnant while the staff headcount more than doubled. It saw similar inflation of posts at SAA and across most state-owned enterprises. So many more posts, so many more salaries, so many more costs, so very much the same of dismal output, if any. Add to this picture the substantial turnovers and balance sheets of some of the big brother SOEs, and you have a fertile space to go and raise funding from, willing lenders to fund the largesse of cadres and cronies, and yes, also to help launder vast sums in blatantly corrupt transactions. In this way, the cash cows of the state were milked dry to the point of collapse. Transnet, Denel, South African Airways, the SABC, the South African Post Office. The list of failures go on, but for the sake of brevity, let's concentrate on the most obvious example, Eskom, an entity that once was world-renowned for its effectiveness and efficiency. It took a very short space of time for very few people and one morally corrupt ruling political party to turn the entity into a basket case, unable to meet its mandate, unable to pay its creditors, unable to sustain the corrupt coal supply deals which lined the pockets of well-placed officials, politicians, and a few Saxon world beneficiaries alike. I'm going to quote at length from an editorial in the Citizen newspaper dated this past Monday, the 4th of November. Quote, "If you are so inclined or ever in a position to do so, here's a foolproof recipe for milking a state-owned enterprise. It has been used multiple times by the ANC deployees since 1994, so it must work. Number one, be an ANC member in good standing. Know the top brass of the deployment committee. Number two, choose an entity which has a big taxpayer-supplied budget. Number three, ensconce yourself as CEO, placing the race or gender card if anyone questions your qualifications. Number four, bring in all your mates who have previous experience in overpaid parastatal jobs, particularly if they failed in those jobs. Number five, appoint them to key positions in the organization, forcing out incumbents, perhaps in the name of transformation. Number six, create extra posts if there are not enough. Number seven, inflate the salaries of all those posts. Number eight, when your comrades can't do the job, bring in consultants at a hugely inflated cost. And number nine, if anyone complains, pull out your cards above. Honourable members, the piece was not intended as satire. It was stated in all seriousness, addressing the life-threatening situation currently at the air traffic and navigation systems, another failed SOE. Please do not think that I'm throwing in the phrase life-threatening lightly. The current state of our air traffic control has the potential to cause the deaths of passengers, like we have unfortunately seen in our rail system. Honourable members, the issues are obvious. I've taken some time to orientate the problems and their causes. The solution of the government to date has been to throw money at the problem. Yes, we call them bailouts. And yes, the amounts have been staggering. It is important to note that the majority of these bailouts were necessitated by the disastrous leadership of one Jacob Zuma, who used the state-owned enterprises as a piggy bank for himself, his close allies, and through his actions allowed many more people, politicians, connected people, and deployed cadres alike to use the tools that were intended to bring a better life to all South Africans for their own personal financial gain. Yes, colleagues, the many are suffering still because of the greed of the few. Since 2015, Treasury has granted bailouts of 457 billion rand. Honourable members, that number is huge. That is almost 6 times what government gives municipalities in equitable share each year. Think how our service delivery could be enhanced if the municipalities at the coal face of service delivery could have had this massive injection into their coffers. Those long-awaited high mast lights, the new sewage line servicing a community, or even a new treatment plant, enhanced water provision. All of these things could have been possible were this money not squandered on SOEs that were treated as a piggy bank by corrupt deployees. To add insult to injury, the SOEs that benefited from bailouts have mostly not turned their operations around. With the exception of SAA, who's now turning at an operating profit, all of the other beneficiaries of bailouts remain in precarious positions due to the fact that the bailouts were demanded and expected and then given without enforceable conditions. The situation became so dire that at one stage Eskom even refused to account to Treasury on how the money was spent. Can it be said that the previous ANC government operated in the best interest of all South Africans? Until 29 May 2024, clearly not. We can only be grateful that the abused, punch-drunk voters have delivered a government of national unity, and so we can now finally celebrate the steady hand of the Democratic Alliance in Treasury. This was demonstrated last week with Minister Gonongwana's confirmation that there was no money for bailouts, and this will continue going forward. If ever there was a reason to celebrate the GNU, this is it. Think how much better it could be if the DA had full control. I would like to conclude, honourable members, with a stark reminder to the voters out there what the difference between the ANC and the DA is, by way of a practical example. Let's compare the tale of the two Malusis.
Bailouts, could you take your seat, please? Honourable.
No, Deputy Chair.
Zimande. What rule are you standing?
No, I'm standing on The rule, Chair, that suggests the speaker is boring.
No, what rule number? Take
The
your
speaker
seat,
is boring.
please.
He has lowered the bar.
No,
He has lowered the
no,
bar.
take your seat.
After a preacher.
Take your seat, please. Out of order. Continue, Honorable Badenhorst.
Hope I get that extra 10 minutes back of my life. Let's compare the tale of the two Malusis. Malusi 1 was once a member of the DA and a mayoral committee member in the city of Cape Town. He got himself embroiled in 1 billion rand dodgy tender deals and he was caught. He was fired from his job before he could cause any more damage and is currently out on 250,000 rand bail awaiting trial. Malusi 2 was once a Deputy Minister of Home Affairs, Minister of Public Enterprises, Minister of Finance and Minister of Home Affairs, all between 2004 and 2018. He's also known as the Chief Architect of State Capture. Transnet, Eskom and South African Airways all suffered from his corrupt attention for years. The Zondo Commission recommended that he should be investigated for, amongst others, receiving cash bribes from the Guptas, corruption and racketeering. Instead, he was rewarded with an ANC seat in Parliament and is now the co-chair, believe it or not, of the Joint Standing Committee on Defence. No wonder our state-owned enterprises failed. Look who was in control. The time has come to turn our backs on ideology and to embrace privatization, whether our ideological friends in their red overalls and camo overalls like it or not. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Badenhorst.
Honorable Dr. Skierkogel, staying with the Free State, let's move on and get inputs from the Honorable Breert. Honorable Breert.
Sure, it's a marathon from that side of the House. Honourable Chair, House Chair, a simple search with reference to SOCs and SOCs does not a Hallmark movie make. It is, as a matter of fact, a very good horror film. The widely available data clearly indicates that the never-ending tax-funded SOE bailouts have a great negative impact and end up causing more harm than good to the South African economy. Business Tech estimates that since 2020, South African taxpayers have spent more than 325 billion rand on bailing out failing SOEs, and National Treasury has set the accumulated baseline reductions to national, provincial, and local government at 457 billion rand over the last 10 years. Imagine how much we could have done with that money. How many health, education, human settled, police, transport departments would have been assisted. The sectors that saw significant reductions in allocations due to other priorities are community development, that saw a reduction of 139 billion rand between 2016 and 2023. That is human settlements, public transport, basic services, and some infrastructure grants. Peace and security lost 71 billion rand, and the majority of that was lost to police, defence and correctional services. And then, of course, provincial health and the education sector also suffered. Though bailouts serve as a short-term financial relief to SOEs, not only the South African taxpayer, but all citizens to keep these dying SOEs alive, while simultaneously doing nothing to prevent more future wasteful expenditure, the South African government, by implication, is giving their consent to the hard-working citizens of this country to pay the price of this government's mismanagement, corruption, and inability to prioritize the actual needs of the citizens they were elected to govern. More needs to be done to create corruption-proof systems that actually address the root of the problem, instead of simply plugging another hole in an already struggling ship that is South Africa. Without any corruption-proof reforms and accountability measures, SOEs will continue to be a constant drain on the South African taxpayers. These bailouts do nothing to further investor confidence, as they show the international world that the government is not serious about holding these enterprises to account, nor are they willing to do what is necessary to prevent them from happening. Well, this was prior to the GNU. We will see, and time will only learn if this betters. Furthermore, the data also indicates that these constant bailouts crowds out the private sector, and distorts the market as the failing enterprises take up the majority of resources, government support, and market space, making it very hard for private business to thrive. What is as bad, and maybe even worse, is in a recent article by News24, it was reported that of the 280 billion rand in bailouts pumped into these failing SOCs, nearly 70 billion rand of that was spent irregularly. What is the point of bailing out these entities if they cannot spend their bailouts effectively enough to prevent future bailouts? These bailouts are snowballing into a much bigger crisis that just lack of investor in another necessary fields like health and education, but tremendously affecting our fiscus negatively. It was found that the lack of capital investment of these SOEs has affected their ability to generate revenue while operating costs continue to grow. These SOEs have also failed to implement their turnaround plans, all this leading to more requests for more bailouts, more borrowing of money, and so on and so forth, and the evil circle continues. As I conclude, the answer is quite simply put. To restore South Africa, we need to build South Africa. We need the political will to address the problems facing SOEs, and that might not be to spend more money on unnecessary bailouts of enterprises that are actually supposed to be self-sustaining. I thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Honourable Breert. Let's move on now to the